Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, where we will cover current stories and topics related to how businesses and organizations are using social media, location-based services, and mobile technology in interesting ways. I'm Corey O'Brien, social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative. How you doing, Corey?
Hey, I'm doing well today. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm doing okay. This is our second episode here, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. The last week's episode was fun, and we were kind of working out the kinks and everything. How you feeling about the first show we did?
I feel good. I feel especially good that we're recording the second episode just 1 week later. We're so far sticking to our schedule, which is nice. So hopefully we'll create a good series of shows here in a short amount of time.
Well, great, and let's not jinx ourselves here by counting our victories only after the second show. Let's get a bunch under our belt. Agreed?
That sounds good.
All right. Well, I saw something really interesting this week that it was just too cute. I was on Instagram, and there happened to be a photo of you with your two dogs kind of posed like a family photo there. It looks like your wife might have snapped a photo of you guys at home and shared it on Instagram with everybody.
Well, not quite at home. It was the dogs on the bed, which they're not allowed at home, but we were on a mini vacation for the 3-day weekend. It was actually my birthday on the 15th, so that was on Sunday. And we had got a hotel room and brought the dogs along, and so we give them a little vacation as well. They got to jump on the bed a little bit, and my wife decided to snap a quick pic and share that with the world, so now there's evidence out there.
So you guys took your dogs with you on vacation?
That is correct, yes. The dogs got to come on vacation. It actually makes it a little bit easier, surprisingly, because you don't have to worry about boarding them and all that stuff. You can just bring them along, and they're fun. They're pretty mellow dogs. They're big and little bulldogs, so they don't have, a ton of energy. You give them a couple of minutes of playtime, and they're pretty much tuckered out for the rest of the day. So,
yeah, they definitely are height deficient. And then one of them is quite a bit smaller. Is it just he's a lot younger?
They're two different breeds actually. The small one's a French bulldog, so she's fully grown at roughly 15 pounds, and the big guy is an Old English bulldog, which means he's fully grown at about 100 pounds, give or take. So,
what are their names?
The little one is Dash, and the big guy is Bogart.
And so I see how it is. You go to a hotel and you allow them to jump on bed, but you want to do it all at home, huh?
Exactly. To be fair, it's a dog-friendly hotel, so they're prepared for pet cleanup if needed. But we didn't leave them on there all day. It's not like they get to sleep on the bed. We just let them jump up there in the morning and say hello.
So you're a fan of Instagram. I mean, that's where I saw the photo, and you guys share photos. You and your wife, both individually with your Instagram accounts, share photos of all kinds of things. But there's been a number of photos of the dogs shared there, right?
That's correct. The dogs end up being pretty popular, actually. Speaking of Instagram, I'm participating in this thing called the Jan Photo a Day, which is sort of an Instagram meme. A blogger out of Australia put together a list of topics, and it's basically one subject matter per day. And so people on Instagram take a picture of that, and then they share it online. And so far, the most liked image that I've taken as part of this series was one of the dogs. That got a significant bit of extra love from the Instagram community just for having a couple of the cute pups in there.
What I guess mission was that fulfilling for the Jan Photo of the Day? What was the mission that you were supposed to shoot that day?
I don't know offhand. There's a couple of pretty generic ones that I'm sure I probably fit it into. There was something called I think Things You Adore. I think that might have been it. It's pretty easy to manipulate the dogs into the theme of the day if you need to, if you're looking for a little extra Instagram love there.
Yeah, you can get some little costumes and things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Favorite movie, and then you've got the bulldogs posing, with let's see, The Matrix or something like that, right?
Well, exactly. It gives you a chance to, decorate the house, get them costumes, and do a little, put on a little show.
the little one dressed as Trinity or something like that. Um, well, cool, and I might have to check it out because I did see a lot of people using the hashtag Jan photo of the day. I think it is, like you said, and
Hmm.
I actually haven't tapped on that and checked out what all the what else everybody else was submitting. So I'll have to do that now. And you did share the link with me to the page of the individual who started that, and there was a whole bunch of stuff listed on the homepage. You want to share that website real quick?
Sure. Let me see if I can pull it
I
up
think it
here.
was funny enough. It was the fatmuslim.com or something like that.
It was hard to. I think it was Fat Mum Slim, as in Fat Mom Gone Slim. But
Are you sure?
when I read it at first, it did sound like Fat Muslim. But I'm pretty sure it was fatmumslim.com.au is I
All
believe
right.
the full and Australian website for that.
Well, being a Muslim guy myself, all I read was Fat Muslim, and I thought that you were like you bought a domain for me or something like that.
Might have to capitalize on that. If she's getting a lot of traffic, you could probably get some fall off search traffic from fatmuslim.com.
That's the keyword that I want to be bidding on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so what we'll do is we'll put it in the show notes so that way people can go ahead and check that out then.
That sounds good.
Or they could Google the hashtag hash Jan photo of the day. I think it was right.
Jan photo a day. The letter
A day photo a
Yep.
day.
Yep.
Cool. Well, you want to lead us into our first topic that you submitted here? We're going to talk about a number of interesting stories that at least we found interesting and kind of our take on why we think it would be important for the subjects that we like to talk about related to digital marketing and advertising. You want to lead into topic one?
Sure thing. So the first topic we had here was a very interesting post by a blogger named Matt Gemmell. And it actually sparked a number of similar posts as a lot of other, pretty prominent bloggers responded in. And the topic of the post was whether or not to allow comments on a blog and the value that comments provide, the symbolism of comments. Does it symbolize a community? Is it worth the effort of filtering through the spam and the crap that comes in through comments to get to the value? Is it a way for readers to participate in the site and have their voice heard, or are there better alternatives now that, it's essentially everybody is 5 minutes and a couple clicks away from having a Tumblr blog and setting up their own place to let their voice heard? Matt, his general consensus was that comments are not worth the effort, and if you really want to comment on something, like I said, set up your own blog, get your voice out there that way. You can link between blogs and get conversation going. And I think this is interesting. I think I might have mentioned to you, Adam, recently I turned off the commenting for a lot of my sites, and really it was a decision based on, well, partly my own desire not to have to go through all the spam and try to weed out the good and the bad and judge whether or not somebody was really who they said they were, if they were just trying to get a link in there to something. So it was more, cutting down on the effort required to host a site, but also the fact that I was noticing a lot of conversation happening naturally on things like Google Plus and Twitter and, people's own channels that they feel ownership of. They were posting links to specific blog posts and then publishing their commentary, and then oftentimes linking back with a tweet to say, hey, here's what I thought, or here was my opinion on that. So it seems like really the conversation has fractured, and it's no longer the case that blog comments are the only place that conversation can happen. In fact, it seems like places like Facebook and Google and Twitter are where the conversation has moved, and so a lot of bloggers are starting to respond to that by turning off comments. Do you use comments on your site, Adam?
Yeah, and in fact, we our blogging is infrequent on our site, and I'm still in a holding pattern with my own personal site that because I've been pretty active elsewhere, which is kind of, I guess, to your point. But I do blog for a couple other social media sites, and I gotta say that I really enjoy engaging with people regarding the comments. But of course, those aren't also my comments to manage.
Right.
And the interesting thing that they note here in Matt's article is, I mean, it's not even as much about spam. I mean, really, spam isn't what's mentioned a lot in the article as far as from what I read. I mean, really, it's about whether or not they want to deal with the tone of the conversation,
Right.
and whether the conversation is kind of the, where do they say here, impulsive retorts, or snark,
Yep.
things that are low quality and are not adding and contributing any value to the conversation. And so it's not about, oh my gosh, it's such a pain in the butt to deal with spam, because spam really can be a pain in the butt. And if you're a frequented blogger, if you're somebody that is really diligent about kind of learning about the commenting aspect of your blog, or using a solution out there that has some protection, spam can be kind of mitigated for the most part. But the attitude of bloggers when you have people actively discussing things on your site is really what seems that everybody's trying to avoid. The other interesting, I mean, what that plays into is that the snark and attitude and so on really come from a certain type of individual, not every single reader to every single type of blog. The article goes into all kinds of the thoughts from other bloggers and other people that are talking about different topics. Like, for instance, his wife, who he mentions has a food blog, and how for her that she would never turn off those comments. For her, food blogging community is very kind of gracious and nice and sweet. Whereas somebody like MG Siegler, who's formerly or part-time TechCrunch writer now, or used to be full-time with TechCrunch, one of the most popular places to have tons of snarky, pain in the butt comments that were adding very, very little value, and folks who just seem to live and thrive off of just kind of letting their voice be heard, as you were mentioning in the comments, rather than, say, taking the conversation and kind of developing out a greater voice on their own blog or Tumblr or wherever else they want to do that.
Right. And I think, it definitely has a full range of comments. You see everything from YouTube comments, which in general tend to be the worst of the worst. And there's a variety of reasons that people argue that that's the case. One being you can essentially comment anonymously. You don't need to attach the comment to your own personal profile. The comment doesn't follow you around the web, so you can kind of leave it there and never have to revisit it. I think, like you said, it's sort of the way that the comments are structured. The best comments don't necessarily float to the top, so there isn't a lot of incentive for people to really think through their comments and write longer comments and bigger thoughts. They're putting their 1 or 2 sentence reaction to it. They're putting that into the comment field. They're clicking enter and they're on to the next video. So it's not necessarily a community as much as just a bunch of people tagging the video and saying, hey, I was here and here's what I thought. From a marketer's perspective, then, how do we use this in terms of, if a company wants to get into blogging, how should they approach the decision of whether or not to allow comments?
I mean, it does depend on the industry, right? Or the type of audience that you're going to be attracting. I find it interesting, again, going back to the food blogger, how they said that the ecosystem of food bloggers uses comments as kind of a way to, I wish I could remember exactly what it was that she said here. Reciprocal comments are a primary means of gaining much needed exposure.
Right.
So in that sense, the audience almost in a way they're all foodies. The people who are blogging are foodies, and the people who are commenting are foodies who also have their own blog to express their opinion. And in that case, there's this kind of cultural aspect about that community that really thrives on that kind of stuff. Then, there were some other comments here talking about, this is a quote from an article that MG Siegler wrote about the topic, saying, commenting is a facade. It makes you think you have a voice. You don't. Get your own blog and write how you really feel on your own site. And, for his audience, that might be fair. More tech savvy, social media savvy folks that are just buzzing around, like you said, and just dropping dropping bombs on blogs just for the heck of it, or trying to get into a match, so to speak, online with it. I mean, I think it would the initial approach is to be aware that there are going to be comments that you need to monitor and
Right.
maintain, and see how it all works. Thinking about a commenting policy, I'm not quite sure how commenting policies, displaying those policies on the sites, um, how effective they are in dealing with people who just have bad attitudes. I think they
Yep.
could care less. I think the only thing that commenting policies on sites do when they're posted, clean and clear there, is almost in a way remind people that you reserve the right to edit your comments, because people sometimes feel that in social media, it is the more authentic thing to do to leave those comments there, and that you're not supposed to curate them or edit them. You have to leave the full entire conversation there. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you can look at each comment as an opportunity to um, to address things, whether they're positive or negative. But some comments just simply do not add any value. And again, we're not even talking about the spam stuff.
Right.
I mean, why did you shut off the comments on your blog?
Well, I think, like I said, the a big part of it was just there was kind of this daily routine of going through and looking at a bunch of spam and spending a lot of time weeding through that without seeing a lot of value out of it. There was the occasional valuable comment that added to the conversation, but a lot of it was just, people saying, "Hey, like this article, thanks for writing it," or "Hey, you bring up some good points, that was interesting." So, not a lot of discussion topics that happened. And I think that the commenting policy that you bring up is interesting. I think that a lot of times, like you said, it is sort of a defensive move, and companies put that up there so that if they do have to remove a comment, or if they do have to take something down and the person gets upset, they can kind of point to that and say, "Hey, look, we tried to be clear with what we were and weren't going to allow, and we felt that your comment went against the spirit of our policy, so we had to remove it," and hopefully
It's
that.
like a disclaimer, right? I mean, that's really all it is.
Exactly. But I think, one potential use for that is to actually go above and beyond a disclaimer and try to direct the conversation, because with the emergence of things like Google Plus and Twitter and Facebook and all of these other channels for people to have their conversations, it fractures that conversation out. It makes it difficult for a company to keep track of it and respond to it all, and find those conversations where they happen and participate in them. So I think, a comment policy could actually be proactively used to say, "Hey, we're going to be monitoring conversation on these 3 channels. We're going to check our comments. We're going to have a Google Plus page that will actively monitor. And if you put something on Twitter with our username in there, we'll read it. But if you put it somewhere else, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get there. So, try to have your conversation in these 3 channels." And being a little more active about directing that conversation and letting people know that, hey, you are taking on a very active role. You're just only going to be able to do it in these certain places.
And it goes to, I don't know if you've ever been able to see Jeremiah Aoyang, the analyst over at Altimeter Group. He always has some great information there. The whole company always has some great information there, and there is the social graphics, I think is what it's called, ladder that he has, talking about the participation level of different people, different demographics of people online, and how some of them, of course, are spectators or non-actives, and others are the creators, and the creators would be at the top of the ladder. And so, I mean, you want to look at that ladder and identify who's your audience, because when you have comments on your blog, that is allowing engagement in almost the easiest of fashions, right? They don't have to have any sort of funky account anywhere on any social network, unless you're using Facebook comments or something like that. But for the most part, they can comment directly on your blog. They don't have to have their own blog someplace,
Right.
and understand the mechanics of writing a blog post and all this. Those folks want to just write something quick, and get it on your blog. And so I'd say you'd want to identify at what level in the social web what's the level of experience for your audience? And additionally, I'd be a little afraid that if you were to remove comments, that you're essentially taking blogging, which in essence is a social medium, and you're taking away, for the most part, the social elements of it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, do you diminish its power? Do you take it, do you rip it from being simply from social media, simply being a publication, with a one-sided voice? But and so that social element is important, and discuss the commenting. The commenting provider. They have a social commenting application that they provide that you can layer on most blogs and so on. I remember when you brought up the whole fragmented thing early on, that a couple of years ago, that's how it started to feel, was when social media was really like Twitter was just finally just hitting tons of growth and so on, that the that the conversation was moving from those blogs to Twitter, and all these folks were talking about how that was happening, and how having a blog was just passe and it was going to die because nobody was going to have those conversations there. And I thought Discuss would go ahead and rectify that, because they were trying to kind of, in a way, pull in a lot of the external conversations and bring them to your commenting area on your site. And they do that with kind of the reactions from Twitter, for instance. But there's a lot of the conversation that's still fragmented, like you said. And it would be really interesting to, in the future, be able to see kind of this multi-channel commenting platform of some sort that would allow you to kind of tab through the various conversations on different sites. And it'll take some more technical integration to make that happen. But for marketers out there, I mean, that would be an incredible tool. And I think we'll cover that, something that almost touches that mark, actually, in the very next story related to Twitter. So the next story is, or the next link that we checked out, was some interesting stuff happening here as we get close to the Super Bowl. The road to the Super Bowl is actually, it looks like a partnership going on between the NFL, Twitter, and sponsored by Chevy, right? Chevy.
Yeah, Chevy.
And you found this on here and shared it with us. What do you find interesting about it?
A couple things. The first thing that I thought was really interesting is that the very first data point that they've got at the very top of the page is comparing two teams, their tweet per minute number, which is Twitter's sort of internal calculation of how many tweets are being said each minute that contain either team's Twitter handle. And part of
and
why
you might want to explain, actually, overall what's going on in the whole page.
Okay. So essentially, Twitter has created a page where anyone who wants to talk about the Super Bowl can do so, and Twitter will then aggregate all of that data into a single page. And it's broken down by specific matchups. So right now I'm looking at it, and it's talking about the January 15th matchup between the New York Giants and the Green Bay Packers. A game that's already occurred, but it still has it up there because that was the last active game. And on there, it's collecting stats and tweets for each side of the matchup. So it's got stats and tweets for the Giants and stats and tweets for the Packers. And then it actually breaks down the tweets that are being said about the game into three categories. So there's coaches and players, which is the coaches and players for either team that are tweeting. Those get brought into a specific tab. There's also analysts. Those are going to be the people who are analyzing the game, typically sports reporters, that type of thing. You can segregate those comments out because that's going to be where you're going to get a lot of the, core information, the analysis of the game, the predictions, that type of thing. And then there's a fans tab where you can see everybody talking about the game. You can get a real, feel for the emotion going around in the game. You can get a feel for the passion of the fans. And then it's all, wrapped in various Chevy branding, and it's got some of the Chevy elements in there as well. But really what it's doing is it's Twitter attempting to aggregate together the entire conversation around the road to the Super Bowl into one place. And doing so on a page that they actually control. The site for this is superbowl.twitter.com. So it's a site that lives on Twitter's main page. They're really putting this out there and saying, hey, this is something we stand behind, and we think you're interested in this data as well. So like I said, the first kind of the thing that really caught my eye initially was the fact that Twitter was using tweets per minute as a way of comparing two things, comparing to one team to another. And typically tweets per minute or even tweets per second is something that they've talked about after the fact, where they'll say, hey, when this certain event happened, we saw a new tweets per second record. But they haven't really compared those numbers to one another the way that they've done here. So tweets per minute, I think, is a very interesting metric, and it's the first time that I've seen Twitter kind of stand behind a specific metric as a way of measuring audience engagement and audience intent. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, was this breakdown of the coaches and players, the analysis, and the fans. It allows users to dive in and say, hey, I want to get my information directly from the source. I want to hear from coaches. I want to hear from players. I want to go kind of unfiltered. And then the next level down was, hey, I want to get this information from the analysts. I want to hear what their predictions are, what they think the final score is going to be, who are the players to keep an eye on, that type of thing. And then the fans, again, getting this real passion for the game, but allowing you to not have to only see fans and kind of be overwhelmed by the things that the fans are saying. You can look at some of these streams that are less frequently updated but have more valuable information.
And I don't think that the top part of the page that's showing, for instance, the tweets per minute and such, is as interesting to me as kind of going down below and being able to see these kind of filtered conversations, like you said, the coaches and players, the analysts and fans. And they have a big fat button right there that says join the conversations, tweet hashtag Superbowl, where when you click it, it just brings up the hashtag directly into an open Twitter box, and you can go ahead and tweet and be a part of the conversation as well. I find it interesting because I'm not a huge football fan. I'm an old time 49er fan, and now that the 49ers are in the playoffs, it's a big deal. It was an awesome game last week and so on. But so for me, I might not have normally gravitated towards a page like this, but I can see them actually applying the same framework for other events and other things that are going on. They could do the same thing for the Olympics. They could do the same thing for, quite honestly, for American Idol and all that. In fact, I think it's even Huffington Post, I think, does similar things on some of their pages where they have feeds from, I think, maybe even some of the authors, but also some people and pundits that are related to the story that they're covering. And so I think this is an interesting way of doing things and of kind of tying Twitter in. Unfortunately, you have to. It takes a little muscle, because you've got to develop out this whole page yourself, and you've got to think about how to segment out. Are we going to filter these conversations by particular Twitter users? Again, taking the example of the coaches, the players, and so on here. Or are we just going to let it all flow and then show some other metrics on here? But I think overall, it's a really interesting way of displaying a very specific conversation. At this time, it's the Super Bowl, but really could be used for anything.
Yeah, I think that, the same way that when Apple's developing applications, they're doing so both because they think that it's something a user could get use out of, but also they're kind of laying a roadmap for other developers to follow. So they're putting it out there and saying, hey, this is when you want to develop a really quality iPhone app that doesn't crash and has good user interaction and good user interface and really engages the person that you're trying to reach, this is how you do it. And then a lot of developers kind of learn lessons from those applications, and they see how Apple does things and they apply them to their own applications. So I think this is, Twitter, one of their first kind of applications that they put out there and said, hey, when you want to talk about an event, or when you want to be part of an event, or compare and contrast one thing to another, this is how we think you should do it. We think tweets per minute is an interesting number. We think hashtags are key. We think, finding specific users that have a voice that a majority of your audience is going to want to pay attention to, and highlighting those users is important. So they're really sending a lot of signals in terms of, how to develop a good application, what works well inside of the Twitter universe, and really how to bring together a conversation relating to the last topic that we discussed.
Yeah, and those are all excellent points, and good takeaways. It'd be interesting to see again throughout the year how others take on these sort of partnerships, maybe with Twitter, or go ahead and build these things themselves based on, kind of like you said, Twitter setting this example. I might come back and check out this page again this weekend when the Niners are in the playoffs, and hopefully in the Super Bowl as well, and just kind of see what kind of action we get out of the page here.
Yeah.
You want to lead into the next story?
Sure. So the next story was, I believe, something that you had surfaced, which was why ebooks will be much bigger than you can imagine. And considering Apple's upcoming announcement around digital textbooks and kind of hopefully revolutionizing the textbook market, I thought this was a well-timed look into the way that ebooks in general have kind of revolutionized the book industry. What caught your eye in this article, and what made you want to share it?
I'm actually kind of bullish on digital publishing, and I think that it's a good tool for not only folks who are wannabe authors, who are authors, but even folks who are just trying to use digital publishing as a means for content marketing. And so getting information out there, disseminating information to folks who are just, hungry to learn about something. I happen to really love the ebooks that people are publishing out there on the different topics that I love. And a lot of times they're giving it away for free, and they don't have to be big. They don't have to be, hundreds and hundreds of pages. They can be quite compact and simple. But in this case, they're, the author is Trey Radcliffe, and he's a really pretty successful and prolific photographer. And so he was talking about his experience in actually publishing a traditional book for the first time, and finding out kind of after he'd celebrated this opportunity of being able to write a book, that he was being tasked with having to market the book. And as the author, he was wondering, wait, I have to help I have to help market this book, and additionally, the small margin, he was saying, I think it was like 15 cents on, I think it was 15%, excuse me, on every book that he ended up making in profit afterwards. And how he kind of jumped back and said that luckily he had a bit of a following. And at the time when he wrote the book, it was primarily Facebook and Twitter. And he was able to do that and a few other things in kind of the real world that were paired up with things that he was doing, like signing books inside Barnes and Nobles, and then tweeting that he had just signed 1 or 2 copies in a store, and getting people to rush on over there and buy that 1 or 2 copies that he had, with his signature. That he found that luckily he had that to leverage. He had a bit of a following, and so having a social presence and some followers and those who were interested in what he did personally, connected to him in social media, helped really make his book successful. But now, fast forward a number of years later, he finds that there's very little you need of a publisher, potentially, as time goes by, because all you have to have is a distribution channel like Amazon or Apple to get your books out there. And then you have a good, social presence through social media, where you can connect with those who are interested, again, reach out to those who are your followers and fans, and try to leverage them in ways to reach out to their friends and fans. And then ultimately, because of the digital goods, they end up making a much higher profit margin on each book sold, because they don't have to share those profits with some other folks, and obviously the production costs are very, very low. And so I think the mixture of the digital goods and the social media was very interesting, and how authors can make direct connections to their audiences and how it's pretty much a necessity. Imagine somebody who has been publishing or writing books for a number of years traditionally and has yet to build up their audience, and what kind of impact that would have on selling the books, and quickly going to the kind of mention of short versus long, that Trey mentions that most experts can get their point across with a book that's 50 pages and sometimes smaller. It doesn't need to be more than 50 pages. And I can believe that. I could probably agree with that's digestible for somebody. It's easier for somebody to go ahead and write that. And so with that said, that's a perfect format for informative ebooks to kind of build on thought leadership, whether it be as a company or as an individual, and get information out to folks who are hungry for that information, and being able to brand that book in a sense. So I think those are all interesting ways that, now whether it's going to make the ebook industry just skyrocket kind of in a way over the next year or two, like he says, or not, I'm not quite sure. I think it's actually the platform that's going to help that happen, meaning, Kindle Fire and an iPad. But I think it's an interesting way for those who want to become authors to do so, and those who want to leverage content marketing to reach out to folks who are now ebook device users.
Right. Yeah, I think it presents two important lessons. The first being, like you mentioned, creating your own content is no longer out of the reach of most people. It used to be, if you wanted to create a book and kind of get your voice heard that way, you had to find a publisher, you had to find a whole team of copy editors, and bring this thing to life was a huge endeavor, when now it's really as simple as, creating the actual content and then turning it into an ebook. You can do that yourself. And so if you're trying to build up an audience, or get your own opinion out there, or get people to kind of believe in your own personal brand, publishing something like an ebook is a doable task, and is not out of the realm of possibility for ways that people can really get out there and get their voice heard. The second thing that I thought was interesting is, Trey, he's sort of done very well for himself with scrappy marketing. And you mentioned going to bookstores and signing books, and, kind of funding his own book tour and going and meeting his audience firsthand. But I think also what worked well for him is that he had an existing audience that wanted to find his book and go hunt it down in the local bookstore. I think if you're an unknown author and you tweet out, "Hey, I just signed a couple copies of a book and put it at the local bookstore," there's not a lot of people running out there. But if somebody's been following you and following your work for a couple years now, they're more incentivized to say, "Hey, I really want to check out this book, and if I can get a copy that's signed by this person, that's going to be even more, even something that I want to work even harder to get at." So I think that, another lesson to take from this was that the book was successful not just because he's a good writer and it was filled with good information, but because he had put in the time to develop his audience and get people who really were passionate about the things that he was saying and the information that he was providing, and that when it came time to put that information into a book, he already had an audience built up.
And that's about engagement, right? And building rapport and so on. It takes some effort.
Yep. Engagement, rapport, and providing consistently good and useful information. Again, I think if he had just put this book out and no one had ever heard of him, it wouldn't have sold nearly as well as it did, because people knew that he's been providing lots of great information through his blog. So if he takes the time to gather up that information and put it into a book that goes above and beyond, it's going to be filled with things that they're interested in, and therefore they're searching out that book to buy it.
And that's actually a really good point, right? Is that he is a blogger, and his blog is, I think, stuckincustoms.com, and that blogging is likely a key component to getting to earning some familiarity with the kind of the value of his content, and attracting people to want to see it in long form and all its kind of beauty in a printed format. And again, that happened a number of years ago in an actual real real book. And now he's not going to be able to run out and sign copies and such if he feels his book should be primarily published digitally. But there's other ways of doing that, and those are things that people should think about a little bit. Or what are the differences between the things you could do and the advantage you could have with having a hard book and then having a digital copy of your book as well. So, are you an ebook? Are you an ebook buyer?
I've started to be. I actually recently got a Kindle. It was a hand-me-down Kindle, so it's sort of the first Kindle that I've ever had, and it was more because I wanted to play around with it. But I find myself, reaching to it as a reading device. I like the experience of using it. But I did pick up a couple books to test out, and I like the advantages of ebooks. One thing that Trey talked about is, it's not that unusual for somebody to buy many more ebooks than they would printed books, just because you're kind of filling up this device, and if you get to it, you get to it, but if not, it's not like you've got this giant book laying around your house. It's kind of always taunting you, so I see that as a definite advantage. That was part of why I wanted to start purchasing more ebooks is, they're more permanent for me. You don't have to move them around. You don't have to find a place to house them. You can just keep them all in one device and read them whenever you are, or whenever you want and wherever you are. So I have, kind of started the transition into being an ebook reader. What about you?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I've read all my books, and I actually have not. But I have found myself going through the similar kind of process that I did when I stopped buying CDs and started, buying music digitally. Music digitally to me is okay. I'm actually a pretty big book fan. I have a whole closet filled with tons and tons of books, and many that I've given away in the past. But I just find being able to just have the one device, I'm an iPad owner. And so just having that one device and being able to just grab what you want and go and read it is great. And in fact, I probably read more things like white papers and ebooks that others have provided as marketing for their company, but sources of information for folks like me and others who are interested in it. I probably do that more because of the short form factor, just like Trey talks about. And so I've actually got a folder filled with ebooks, that are only between 100 and maybe even only 20 pages long, talking about anything from marketing to, design and metrics and whatever else that I'm just kind of find interesting. And it's all provided for free, but they're branded pieces of material from folks that I would consider, thought leaders. So,
Yeah.
You want to move on to the next item?
Yeah, sure. So this was the 4 Seasons Embracing Digital Marketing and Virtual Experiences. And I believe, again, this was something that you had brought up. So what caught your eye on this article?
I mean, it's really interesting to hear a company talking about these experiences that they're creating digitally. And, a company like the Four Seasons, this article was in Ad Age, and it was with Susan Helstab. She's been with the Four Seasons for 25 years. And a few years ago, she's been named as the executive VP of marketing. And it was interesting to hear her as somebody who was very kind of phobic of using digital marketing and particularly social media, kind of suddenly embracing it. And really, they're embracing it in a pretty considerable way, especially for a luxury brand. And luxury brands, they are a little bit more wary a lot of times when it comes to social media, due to their need to feel make their products and services and so on feel a little bit more exclusive. Mm-hmm. But they are actually dedicating 50% of their budget to digital marketing. Which is a pretty, I think it's a pretty sizable amount. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. And I think, not only the amount, but she talks about just the number of initiatives that they've put in place. So it's easy to spend 50% of your budget if you're dropping that into, let's say a giant Twitter staff and all you do is manage Twitter. But she's talking about things like, wine tastings and mobile chocolate bars and really a full range of interesting and brand building experiences that aren't just hiring another person to put out, the next tweet for the next day. So I thought, interesting to hear just the total dollar amount, but also the total number of things that they're experimenting with right now.
Well, and you said wine tasting, but even more specifically, it's a Twitter wine tasting.
That is correct. Yes, important distinction.
That's the unusual part is I really find it pretty cool that they did not kind of overthink it. They just said, look, we're going to have an offline experience. We're going to have wine tastings in some of our hotels, and we're going to share that experience by tweeting. And part of what we want people to do is actually buy the product. Mm-hmm. And so why can't they just be told, this is the experience we're going to have? And if you are a digital citizen, if you're somebody who enjoys being social online and using Twitter, then we'll all participate together. And what they're doing is blending the online and offline experience, because they have people doing a wine tasting at the hotel and then they're tweeting at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know the mechanics of how they did it, if they had a page that was, aggregating the content, or if they were using a hashtag or whatever, which I'm sure is probably how they did it, at least superficially. But that whole kind of blending of online and offline and really kind of keeping it simple, and just saying, look, how can we take this experience that we would normally have at our hotels and bring people closer and bring people into it from the digital world who couldn't otherwise maybe make it, or might just be simply in the kind of awareness phase still, or just interest phase, where they aren't there are type of people, they're wine drinkers, but they haven't officially come over and stayed at the Four Seasons maybe, or haven't done it in quite some time. It's really about kind of nurturing those folks.
Yeah, and I've always been a little jealous of luxury brands. I think they have the ability to focus more on kind of building their brand and not necessarily have to focus directly on, let's push out products and promotions and try to sell our brand. They're, in this article, she never mentioned, we're doing discounts on Twitter and we're giving 10% off to all of our Facebook fans. It was more about, we want people to see Four Seasons as providing these unique experiences so that when they're planning their vacation and they're thinking what hotel is going to be able to, book that special cruise or get me into that special restaurant, they're going to think of Four Seasons first, because Four Seasons has already provided them with a unique experience of, in this case we mentioned the wine tasting or this chocolate bar that they've done. So it's really about building up the perception in the consumer's mind of the brand and of positioning it in a certain way, and they don't necessarily have to worry as much about pushing sales and how many customers did we drive through each one of our initiatives. They can take a broader look at the social media activities that they're doing.
Yeah, and they're doing it in a big way. I mean, they're not doing it in a small way. They have many hotels. I don't think in here it notes exactly how many hotels that they have. Actually, she talks about traveling
35 different countries, I believe.
35 different countries, and I know that they mentioned something in here about something that they did at 86 hotels. So I mean, I would imagine maybe they have over 100 hotels, maybe even over a couple hundred. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, they have a Twitter feed and a Facebook account at the corporate level, but also each hotel in the different locations have their own Twitter account, for instance, and letting each of those hotels, which probably has a unique flavor unto itself, express those experiences uniquely is a really interesting thing. That takes, I personally think it takes some guts, and I think, but that risk pays off. And the risk I'm talking about really is, being able to control or at least train and keep under control, all of the discussions and all the things happening when you let your brand kind of permeate through all those different channels separately.
Yeah.
And so I kind of really admire her ability to kind of let that out and go ahead and try it. And currently they have 220,000 Facebook fans and over 185,000 Twitter followers, which is good. I mean, it's really, really good, especially for a luxury brand that really doesn't need to have. I mean, it's a smaller group of people, right? It's not 100. It's not totally mainstream for everybody. There's a certain type of person that's gonna fork over the money to go to a Four Seasons, whether it be for vacation or business.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of risk, I thought the other interesting thing that she mentioned in the article is the fact that they've embraced these new areas of the web that are consumer reviews, and consumer reviews are traditionally something that luxury brands have shied away from. They try to position their brand and keep it free from people actually, expressing their experience with the brand specifically, but she's kind of said, hey, we're going to embrace this, and we're going to link directly to things like TripAdvisor and bring those ratings into each one of our individual hotel sites. And so when somebody goes to book it, they're going to be able to see exactly what other customers have done at our hotels and have experienced. And we stand by our brand enough to feel that those reviews are going to be representative of how we want people to think of our hotels. And I thought that was an interesting stance to take. I mirror a lot of those feelings. I think that for most people, being able to get to those reviews is just a click and a Google search away. So why not be upfront about it and say, hey, we understand that this is the types of sites and the types of numbers you're going to be looking for. So we'll cut that extra step out of the process and just show you what our reviews are. We stand by the product that we put out there and the quality that we provide, and we think that people will recognize that and will review and rate us accordingly.
I think based on what these guys are doing, I'm going to be interested to kind of keep an eye on them from a perspective of a kind of a global brand that's a hotel and also from a luxury branding perspective. I'll be interested to see, because I think they're doing some things, as I said before, above and beyond kind of just engaging with people on Twitter. So it'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So you brought up a really interesting little tidbit of a story titled "The Sweet Tweet." There was a cool video, which unfortunately we can't show here, but you'll see in the notes, talking about this little contraption that was made. Who was it that made that little machine?
Let's see here. It was Uniform, which they're Uniform Research Lab. I believe they're a agency. I think they're out of the UK, actually.
And then let's see.
So just to quickly describe the video, it's kind of a Rube Goldberg-esque contraption that starts with a cuckoo clock going off, and this cuckoo clock puts looks like either a gumball or some sort of hard candy onto this track, and the video itself kind of follows this candy down the track as it's going over jumps and through loops, and it's really a fun video to watch. It's they've done well with colors and things to make it engaging, and it's kind of cute. And then at the end of it, you find out that what this machine's doing is every time they get a new Twitter follower, it's dropping this gumball into the machine, and everybody in the office can kind of hear this gumball working its way through the machine, and they get all excited. Hey, we got a new Twitter follower, and we're getting a little candy out of it as well. And what I thought was interesting about this is it's showing how, obviously the video and the story behind this is marketing for Uniform, but it also shows how they've done a simple action, but something that really rewards the people that work for them for participating in social media. And I think this is, an important thing for companies to keep in mind is it's no longer just the one person that handles social media and they're off on their own and they're out tweeting, they're out, participating online. It really has to be the entire company embracing it. And it doesn't have to be the entire company out there creating messages and tweeting on behalf of the company, but everybody should be aware of, Twitter followers and Facebook fans and what's happening on these communities. and potentially even rewarded when those communities do well. You know, another kind of bigger example we saw was Google putting all of their eggs into the Google Plus basket and actually basing employee bonuses on well, they kept them private, but they had specific goals in terms of new members that they wanted to reach. And employee bonuses were going to be based on reaching those goals. And so they really, you know, kind of put their money where their mouth is. And they said, hey, we want this thing to work. And so we're putting some incentive behind it in order to get everybody on the same page and everybody on board to support this thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? When you see things happen digitally, if you don't make that kind of physical connection, that real world connection to like another human being in a way,
Mm-hmm.
you can sometimes forget that that's actually why, what another Twitter follower means. It's an actual human being connecting to us, and so kind of having that connection with just even simply a gumball coming down a ramp and being available to somebody, the only reason that gumball came down is because an actual human being has connected with us. And what does that mean? And so that physical representation in the real world at that office, it's just kind of an interesting way to signify that.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go on to our last story here. That was one I shared, I guess, huh?
Yeah, last story of the day. So I believe that was the Smash plot debuting on both iTunes and Amazon a couple weeks before its TV premiere.
Smash Pilot. Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pilot, yes.
I was like, plot, huh? They
The
they they,
Smash plot.
they, they the TV show Smash is kind of a musical show based on somebody coming to New York or something like that and wanting to perform on Broadway. You can tell that I'm, sound like the ultimate fan. But they advertised it a lot during the Golden Globes. They've been advertising it kind of infrequently for a couple months now. And, you had some really interesting points as to what you feel that it signified by not just putting up the pilot a day beforehand, but putting it up a couple weeks, and not only just putting it on iTunes, but having it on Amazon. And in the article, they actually mentioned that it would be leaked. I kind of call it leaking. It's leaking on purpose, but leaking the pilot across a whole bunch of other digital video channels online.
Right.
What were your thoughts on it?
So essentially it's kind of signifying that for NBC at least, the online audience in aggregate is the new influencer. So the old way of premiering a show, as far as I understand it, was to find kind of these tastemakers and these influencers, and maybe it's the people that write the TV column for the local paper, and giving them the show and saying, hey, check this out and let us know what you think about it. And, if you could please kind of let your audience know about it. But NBC has said, hey, if anybody's interested in checking this new show out and getting a sneak peek at it, go ahead. We're going to make that easy for you. We want you to build your early impression of it and then go out and talk about the show with people. And part of why that's smart is that, they kind of understand that anybody who's going to go out of their way to download a pilot or stream it or, hunt this thing down a couple weeks before it actually airs on TV is probably a pretty dedicated fan. So this is the type of person who, they're either a fan of NBC's other shows, maybe they like Glee and they heard this is similar to Glee, and so they want to go and find the next best thing. But this is the person who's gone out of their way. They're going to be more likely to talk about the show with others. They're going to be more likely to, give direct feedback to NBC. They're going to be more likely to, maybe even start blogging about the show. It gives people enough time to maybe set up a fan blog or set up a Facebook page that's kind of dedicated to the show. So it's kind of self-selecting your best fans and then letting them spread the word on the show. And again, kind of putting faith in the show that you've created and saying, hey, we think people are really going to like this. So we're not trying to control a negative reaction. We're trying to amplify a positive reaction. So I thought it was a really smart move on their behalf and something that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot of other networks debuting shows in a similar way.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said now and what you said about the Four Seasons, where they have to really believe in their product, right? Or they have to believe in what they're putting out there to do this without fear that there's going to be a negative reaction or whatever. And in putting it out there, I guess as they see it, is that those who see it ahead of time, again, like you said, could be really they are the influencers. They are big fans, and because they've spent that time to go out and hunt it down, so therefore they're more likely to watch it. They're more likely to enjoy it. They're going to tell their friends. They're going to tweet about it. They're going to do all these things that will hopefully give it a bigger boost ultimately when the show is on the air. And get people who may not have taken that leap to go hunt it down, but would be interested in watching the show. And ultimately the success of the show, I mean, shows get canceled within just a few episodes a lot of the times. And so I don't know at the moment how they're going to quantify the success. How would they, if they would be able to quantify success simply by how many people had viewed it online? But if they're mostly worried about how the Nielsen ratings are and how many people are watching it actually on TV, this could actually give it a shot in the arm at the very beginning, rather than giving it a shot in the arm after the episode airs and then it's put on Hulu and then people go and they watch it on their DVRs and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So it'll be really interesting. I'm interested in the whole kind of companion viewership thing, something that we slightly covered last episode with, I think it was a Nielsen research piece. But I think it's really interesting to see how people will kind of build up and start tweeting about this stuff, and rather than doing it during the show, which they're likely going to do as well, but they're going to be doing it building up to the show again in a much bigger way than they would have if all they got to see was a few trailers and a bunch of advertisements on TV.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think that is all of our topics for the week.
I think so. I think episode 2 is in the can.
Is in the can. We just copied Leo Laporte with that one, huh?
I'm not a This Week in Tech listener, but if he does it, we can stick with it as well.
Oh, you're not?
No, my podcast list is full at the moment. I'm listening to more things than I can even keep up with as is. So if something else drops off, I might be able to pick up This Week in Tech. But for now, it's one of those that I'm interested in, but just haven't had a chance to check out.
I have to check out. I think you've been more adventurous in a way. I've stuck with similar podcasts for a long time, and I think I need to branch out because there's a lot of quality stuff out there for free. And we hope to be included in that list.
Yes, definitely.
So you want to tell people where they can find us, Corey?
Sure. So being the social media show that we are, we have created a full range of ways to get in touch with us. The first one would be to reach us directly. So I am at Corey O'Brien, and Adam can be reached at Secret Sushi. If you want to tweet the show directly, it's at Solo Mo Show. We also have a Google Plus page, so just go ahead and search for Solo Mo Show on Google Plus. You will see us there as well. And we encourage people to share the show with others. We hope that we're putting information out there that's valuable, and being a new show, only two episodes in, we would love any support that we can get from the fans out there to get this thing out and really build up our audience. So we're thankful to everyone that's listened to our second episode here, and look forward to many more in the future.
And besides, supporting the show by just listening to it, please help us shape it by telling us what you think. If there's any ideas that you have, or anything that you think that we might be able to kind of change and tweak, that would be a big help from you guys as well.
Yeah, correct. So any suggestions could actually come in through solomoshow@gmail.com.
So once again, thank you guys for listening. Check us out online at all those places that Corey mentioned. And until next week, this is the Solo Mo Show, and have a good week.